Okay, here we go. It is Wednesday, April 16th, 2025, the day after tax day, 5:30 p.m. This is a city council work session, and we have a two-part agenda this evening. One part dealing with franchise fees and another part dealing with our legislative update from Katie Sen at Mesley and Kramer, who's doing a great job for us over there at the state capitol. But let's first call the meeting to order and ask our clerk, Sharon Allison, to call the roll.
Councilmember Agnew. Here. Councilmember Jackson is absent. Councilmember Pierce is absent also. Councilmember Risser.
Here.
Mayor Hovland.
Here. All right, so I think we're going to take things in sequence as they are in the published agenda, and we're going to deal with the franchise fee or continuation of the franchise fee discussion that we started at the work session on that Saturday. So do you want to go just set it up, or you want
that was all the setup I was going to give it. So we've got, it's kind of 50-50.
All right.
And Chad and Marissa and
Paul, if we need to.
Paul, if we need to.
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll continue that discussion from the council retreat about a month ago. So a little background, this state statute allows cities to do the franchise fee and franchise agreements, how we collect that revenue. And then the history. In Edina, we started in 2012 by establishing the Pedestrian and Cyclist Safety Fund, the PACS Fund. Then in 2016, we added the Conservation and Sustainability, or the CAS Fund. 23, I was before the council, and we updated the rates. We increased the rates and added streetlights as an eligible use and updated those fees. And those took effect in early 2024. And as part of that report in August 23, we said we'd be back in 25 and 27 to consider additional increases. And then we also had some comments about whether we're doing the flat rate or the percentage-based fees at that time. So again, we're at that point where we said we'd be back. So at the council retreat, directed staff to proceed with a couple options to generate an additional $1 million for street reconstruction. And we again noted the importance of the PACS Fund, the CAS Fund, and street lighting. So tonight and in the packet, you'll see option one is for discussion to adopt an updated flat fee model effective January of 26, with a larger increase for commercial and industrial sector, and I'll show you the tables and the rates on those. And the option two that we provided you was to adopt a new percent fee model effective that same January 2026, establishing a 4% fee for all customers. And in both options results in approximately a $4 million annual franchise revenue, which is about 1.3 million additional than what we collect today. Because today we collect $2.7 million.
Okay. So am I interrupting you guys? There's something that was.
Okay. So today we estimate we generated $2.7 million of revenue. And it's broken out 50% PACS at 1.3, 39% at $1 million, and then streetlights just under 300,000 at 11%. And this is the current fee structure. The arrow shows the monthly fee. Those are the numbers we always kind of report out to the council and residents. We got natural gas or CenterPoint Energy for the top 5 rows, and then XL Energy for the bottom 4. They all have their own customer classes. Each one has a residential class, and that's typically the one we talk about. So in both cases here with our flat rate model, we have $3.55 on each one of those utility services for a total for customers of $7.10. And then the commercial just falls in line with different rates. So that one column with the monthly fee, you'll see that common in these next few tables. We just showed annual fee, meter counts, and estimated revenue just as if we ever get that deep into the details. One of the things we hear from residents and commissions is that the residential customers account for about 67% of that revenue. You can see we have 700,000 residential for gas and over 1 million residential for electric. So that's 67% of that revenue today. And then we thought we'd do some peer city comparisons on that residential customer class. So you can see here we have Brooklyn Park is at the top end of that at $7 for electric and $7 for gas. So this is just per each. And Plymouth is on the low end of $3.53. So Edina is towards the end of these comparison cities at $3.55 per month for each electric and natural gas. And then the uses there on the column on the right-hand side, how those other agencies use this funding. Some similar to what we do and some not. And then we compared the commercial class, and this, we had to kind of estimate
Julie has a
ranges.
question for you.
Oh,
Can
sorry.
you go back to that? We really kind of are an outlier in terms of our uses, it appears to me. Most people are, or most cities are using it for pavement management, correct?
Yep, Minnetonka to streetlights too, that's similar, but yeah, and Scott could probably speak to this. We saw a need for not assessing for sidewalks, and that was a difficult conversation, assessing for sidewalks. And Scott proposed this use. And then the CAS to do climate action was a difficult conversation. We didn't have a funding source. So we use this as a method to fund those two high priorities that residents and council had and still have today.
When other cities say pavement management, are they talking sidewalks or are they talking roads?
Typically streets.
Typically streets, okay.
And they may use it for reconstruction and maintenance. I guess we'd have to dig in. Well, here it says reconstruction, so it's both, like the mill and overlays.
And I guess a lot of them are in lieu of special assessments
Yeah.
too, right? So they maybe had special assessments and then they adopted these and replaced them.
That was Brooklyn Park's example, for sure.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see your question. And then comparing those peer cities on a commercial class. And again, we had 4 or 5 different classes of commercial buckets in that table. So this just shows the minimum and maximum. So Edina's at $6 for one commercial class, all the way to $71. You can see we're towards the bottom again, whereas Bloomington's at almost $12 to $182. So this is just giving you an idea of where we land with comparable cities near and around us on the commercial side. There's also cities that do the percent-based fees, and that was one of the options we'll discuss tonight. So these are some of those cities. Hopkins, Minneapolis are the 2 closest. Again, they break it out by electric percent and natural gas on the residential side, which is column 2 and 3. And then the last 2 columns are that commercial industrial rates. And this just shows a little bit easier breakdown where they range from about 3% to 5.25% on the residential side, which is on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side on the customer or commercial customers, it goes from 3 to 6.75%. So we're gonna talk about a 4% rate for you this evening, and that falls kind of in the middle of these ranges of other agencies. So if we get into the various options, so option 1 is updating the flat fee model. So this maintains our current model. It increases fees across all customer classes. We're recommending to increase the residential customers per the memo we put together in 2023, but then doubling the rates on the commercial industrial customers to get closer to change that percentage and address some of those comments we heard from residents and commissions. That today that 67% is too high. If we followed this, I think we'd be at about 50% residential commercial. It would generate $4 million, which is an incremental increase of $1.3 million from today. Similar table, but this is with the new rates. So on the residential side, we'd go from $3.55 to $4.40. And then as an example, the second row, commercial A, would go from $6 to $12. And all those would double from their current rates. And then we again show the annual fees, meter counts, and estimated revenue. Why would we or would not consider this or consider the flat fee model? Why would we support this? It creates an approach that's predictable revenue and the same fee for all customers within that same class. And it's predictable for the customers regardless of the utility rates or consumption. Why wouldn't we? This flat fee is the same regardless of energy use. So a high energy user pays the exact same fee as a more energy conscious user. Now going into option 2, we'll talk about the percent fee model. So we could adopt a new percent fee model, establishing a 4% fee for all customers. Option 2 creates that on the utilities gross revenue. So it's based on revenues. Each individual customer fee would vary depending on consumption. So the monthly and annual fees estimated are averages based on the 2024 gross revenues of those utilities with their customer counts in each customer class. So they're estimates. Again, we're generating about the same amount of money, the $4 million, with an incremental of $1.3 million. And this is again based on 2024 numbers, and actual revenues would vary by customer and by utility. If we took the average of what we do today, if we converted that flat rate today, we'd be at about a 2.7 average, But we showed a little different way to show that too. So we took that current flat rate fee in that first column and tried to convert it to a percentage fee, just so you guys could see where we're at. So on the residential side, we're at a 4%, commercial is 8, commercial B is 1, so it gives you some ideas of where we land. And again, if you took all those and the meters and the revenue, it averaged about 2.7% today. We're proposing that 4%, and this is how the estimated monthly fees would change. So on the gas service, you'd go from $3.55 to $3.39. And we have a table at the end that summarizes all these changes. This just gives you an idea of how those rates would change per customer class with the 4% monthly fee. So why would we consider this? This approach is based on consumption. So higher energy users pay their fair share of the fee. It rewards efficiencies and energy conservation. Why wouldn't we support this? There's a risk of not meeting revenue. The flat fee guarantees the same amount each year, whereas the percent model is based on utility revenues. So if we have a really warm winter when they're not using as much gas, or a cool summer when we're not using as much electricity, the revenues would be lower in that case. Some of the predictability goes away with those high use months and rate increases. And certain customers, we'll show you in a table coming up, will see very large increases in their bills. So here's that table I think we'll probably talk about a lot here. It's the second to last slide. This shows the first column is the current monthly fee for those customer classes. The second column with the orange arrow is that monthly fee increased. And again, we increased the residential per the memo we did 2 years ago. The other customer classes are just doubled from what they are today to try to shift more on that commercial industrial for the revenue. And then if you jump one over to the other orange arrow pointing over here, here's the percent change from what it is today. So 355 to 440 is a 24% increase. And then you can see all the commercial ones are 100%. And then it's the same for Xcel Energy on the bottom. And I think the last column is probably where your interest is if we do that 4% flat or 4% fee model. Here's what the estimated number we generate per month and the change from today. So for the gas service on a residential, it would go down 5%, roughly, estimates again. This one would go down 52. This class of customer would go up 179%. And the small, this customer class would go up 194%. And the same percentage changes we calculated for those 4 classes under Xcel Energy, what we're estimating there. So just give you a last kind of wrap up is we need direction from the council in May to complete the regulatory process. So if we get enough direction tonight, maybe we don't have another discussion. If we need another discussion, because we have 2 members missing, we come back in May and have that discussion at a council meeting. We need to know enough to what to move forward with so we can have the ordinance approved in July and August. Because the utilities need time to do their calculations, go through the Public Utilities Commission and get approval by the end of the year. So those new rates would start in January of 2026. So we'd love to discuss option 1 and option 2 with the council this evening.
I think we could have that discussion, but I'd like to have a decision emanate from all 5 council members, not 3 of us.
I agree.
Okay. So we kind of intended to bring this back on May 6th at an open council meeting and have almost a similar presentation and get their feedback.
So can you talk a little bit about, we talked about sources and then talk about uses again and allocation of use of funds?
Yep. So we'll go back to that
So
slide.
helps us think through the commercial versus residential aspects of it.
So any changes to the fees and rates, we would, this is our current breakdown, but we would add in the $1 million for street reconstruction. So I think I had a slide hidden with that hidden, and I didn't update the percentages.
Okay.
We're at 38, 29, 8, and 25. Is that right? That is right.
Yeah, that is right.
Oh, they can't.
So
That million represents the amount of shift you've been doing each year over that 16 years? Does that make sense?
the $1 million was the number we heard from the council. We just, the general tax levy is supporting street reconstruction at a total of, I don't remember the total amount, but we said we wanted to potentially take down $1 million, which is X percent of a general levy
It would
increase.
still then continue to be the 16-year plan. already.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it'd still be this.
But
this
it would
is
be a
just-
reduction
A reduction.
In levy.
in allocation and levy on those
Exactly.
people that are receiving an assessment.
Yeah, the whole policy would be the same, the people wouldn't see any difference, it's just how do we fund it in the background. Instead of going all from taxes, you would use some of the franchise fee to cover street reconstruction. So this would be the breakdown with the $4 million that we would look at. We feel PAC should still get more, because PAC's works ties directly to the climate action plan of creating more multimodal transportation options to get people off the road. So if it's a little higher, that seems all right to us, so.
So I'm still trying to kind of mentally wrestle through this notion of, where most of the benefit goes. Seems like it goes to neighborhoods, single-family neighborhoods, as opposed to commercial districts. So when I think about the fact that some folks thought it was unfair that residential accounted for about 60% of the franchise fees, seems that's where most of the benefit goes too. So I don't know if you have a different view of the world on that, but it would be good to talk that through because the flat model increases the obligation of commercial, industrial, right?
Yeah,
Doubles it basically.
and we don't have to, that was what we thought we heard from commissions and residents in the past. Yes, the PACS builds out sidewalks, the majority of our land use is residential. So yes, it's gonna be through residential neighborhoods more than commercial, just because it makes up more of our land.
But street reconstruction is everywhere throughout the city.
Yeah. But again, when you look at 50th and France, it's only little, very short streets compared to your neighborhood you live in, so still even there, it's a short piece. So yeah,
So I really appreciated including all of the data of neighboring cities. I felt that for me was really influential, and I know we always appreciate making kind of data-driven decisions, and I was surprised that we were lower in the lower edge with both of those comparisons, so thank you for including that. One thing that I was reflecting on, especially in comparing option 1 and option 2, is it also feels like we would remain in the lower end in the percentage-based model. I forget exactly which slide it was in our report, but you included, I think, some of that comparison information as well, and
yep,
neighboring cities went anywhere from 3% on some to 5% to 5.25% up to 6.75%. So it kind of did range as well. And I think I'm not saying we need to go jump to the highest, but I like kind of remaining in that middle ground, which is how I'm assuming we ended at the 4%. But I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about why you're recommending 4%, especially when that leads to a decrease from the residential component, and if you were to recommend a percentage that would keep that more on par, or potentially a small incrementally increase that. I think like we had initially suggested, what might that percentage be?
so we'll start with how the 4%, because when we ran numbers 2 years ago, we were looking ultimately in 28 to be around $4 million of revenue. So we thought if we're gonna make changes now, we do it one time and we're done, we don't have to come back in 2 more years. Second question, can you repeat the second? Sorry, right before you're gonna.
If we were to suggest a
Oh, yeah.
different increase for the residential,
Yep.
that would slightly increase it, similar to how we had been planning on increasing it approximately 24%. Do the math for me, but what would that increase actually result in from a percentage standpoint?
So we,
Do like a 4.5%.
So
Yeah.
so what percentage would you could set for the residential class? So yeah, you
Not
should,
reduce that.
yeah.
we're almost there right now. So right now it's totaled at $7.10. Option 1, we go to $8.80. Option 2, we're at $8. So we're basically at, because it's an interesting.
You're adding them together.
We add them together, because
Okay.
the gas one's going down,
Yeah.
the natural gas is going up. So there is an increase already in both models with residential. And it's not that different. So it's about 80 cents different between option 1 versus option 2 on a residential customer. So we could tweak it just to get that 80 cents between the two if you wanted. But then we'd have what the public utilities don't want some weird.
Well, you can set,
You said
the
residential
percentages, you
different?
can, yeah, residential customer class could be 4.25. And then the commercial classes could be a different percentage. It's just you wouldn't be able to separate within like the residential class. Beyond that, it would just be
Okay.
like the set amount for all
You
residents.
can't make additional customer classes than what they have here.
Could we do it by line item though? Like, let's say we did, making all those up, but for commercial industrial C, they could be at 5% instead. Okay. Thank you for that, just helping me understand the percentage base a little bit more. I think it might have been actually Councilmember Pierce that brought up this point at our budget discussion, but in general, I like the idea of going to the percentage base because I think it gives residents in particular, but also our commercial parties, the opportunity to decrease if needed. And I want to give that agency and I want to allow them to decrease if they want to, right? Like this is something that is partially within their control. And I like, especially when we're talking about electricity, correlating it to drive down use, because I think that that's something that we want to see across the board anyway. So I like the percentage-based model. I'm just thinking through, can we tweak the numbers a little bit to not have such wild swings? Like I also like, well, some are going up 180, 190%, some are decreasing 90%. Just thinking through, is that our desired outcome or is there a way to even that more? But I know that with some of those, that would actually mean telling them they're paying a 34% rate, which probably isn't what we want. So just, that's where I'd like to see maybe a little bit of flexibility is what might be more appropriate percentages that are still within a reasonable range.
Well, and to generate enough revenue. So I think it's important to keep in mind, a residential customer at $8, what's their income in that home? Versus some of our businesses, $400 is a blip in the screen. They're not even gonna notice that at all, even though it's a 500% increase.
Yeah.
So the information we have,
Yeah,
we think those large ones aren't even gonna notice this either.
right.
And that's a good point.
Just keep in mind, it's relative in scale of their operations.
Yeah, and I would just note changing to a percent model, no matter what, will result in a swing because the range of energy use, both on the residential side and commercial side, is very large. A 1,200 square foot home consumes a lot different electricity and natural gas use than a 10,000 square foot home, just by nature of the size of the building. And then same with businesses. You could have a really small business, but a very intense energy use on site there versus a really large building like a warehouse that only has lighting demand. So the swings are just really hard to manage in a percent-based model. Whereas like with a flat fee model, it's truly, you are setting that so you don't have as much swing regardless of the users across the board.
Yeah.
And you gotta be careful, because we're saying 500% increase on this last one. If we go back, that's generating $1.1 million. So if we wanna flatten that out, it's gotta be made up somewhere else, so.
Did you ever run a mix and match model? I mean, maybe that's the wrong term, but, you know, let's say, one of the things I think has been appreciated by residents is that we kind of tiptoed into this franchise fee issue and we've said, okay, it's only gonna be $1.50 per utility per month. And now it's, what is it, $3.50?
Yep, $3.55 each.
$7 a month, real predictable.
Yep.
And so I've liked that predictability, and I've liked for residential customers to know that not only is it predictable, but it seems modest. Percentage could make some people anxious. I see the GHG benefits of it, or it's like water usage, you know, trying to encourage people to be more cautious in their usage. But on the other hand, they don't feel that same sort of concern for the commercial customers. For a percentage, might be just fine, because those are the biggest producers of greenhouse gases anyway.
Can you mix and match, do you know?
Well, to answer that question, Marissa, could you talk a little bit about the role of the utilities and the PUC in this process?
Right, so we would pass our ordinances, submit them to the utilities, who would then have to go through a regulatory process with the Public Utilities Commission to get approval. And then there's a notice period to customers that that fee is changing. In terms of setting like a flat fee for residents and then a % fee for commercial customers, we could look to see if other cities have done that, but I'm not familiar with any that do it. They kind of all go all in, either everyone's a flat fee or everyone's a % fee.
So we don't know if it's legal.
Can you go back to the slide with the, that shows the range of what the prices would be?
For all of them?
What the
Yeah.
percentage?
This one?
No, it was like a bar graph. It had,
Well, that was just current stuff.
oh,
We didn't, but I can show, we had a lot of bar charts.
That way.
This is currently what these cities have for residential on the left-hand side, commercial on the right-hand
you
side.
know, I'm saying it wrong. That showed the range of use or whatever. It was,
Oh.
yeah,
The uses,
there we go.
this.
Yeah,
These are
Okay.
for flat rate cities.
okay. I agree with a lot of what Kate was saying, and that it would incentivize potentially being mindful of how much electricity you are using. And actually, I was thinking about our water rates and whether there would be an opportunity to say, once you've gone past X amount of gas usage or electricity usage, then it bumps up to an even higher rate.
You can't.
You can't do that? Okay, all right.
You can't do that and you can't cap it.
Oh, okay. But I think, you know, as we're seeing more and more electric use, it really does make sense to try to get people to think about conserving. So,
Yeah, and if you look at, I mean, another thing just to think about is the total number of meters, right? We're a residential city, 16,000 on gas meters and 23, almost 24,000 electric meters.
It's less predictable on the percentage.
It is, yep.
And if people are reactive in the way that Kate and Julie are thinking, it could be even more unpredictable. Might be
Well,
much less than we
Marissa
want
is-
to raise.
It would,
Versus.
We had
this
Double.
great, it'd have to be
It's a mixed bag.
yeah.
be a widespread adoption, for like a very significant portion of like residents or businesses to substantially reduce their use. Like the larger impact here is often weather. So really warm winters, we'll see a drop in gas use, and so a drop in that revenue versus a really, really cold winter, people are using a lot more gas. And so that would be a high revenue year, and then even vice versa on the electricity side. Really, really warm summers, which we're seeing more of, and we're seeing warmer winters with just climate change, that, you know, those are environmental and like larger economic factors versus truly 1,000 residents adopt really great efficiency behaviors wouldn't have a significant impact on revenue as much. They'd really see it on their own bills versus the citywide total revenue.
It seems like it would be less regressive if it was also the percentage.
I mean, one thing you try to do, cities try to do with this rate structure is to try to not pick a fight with the utilities, right? So if you can be in the middle or close to the median, wherever your rate structures are, they won't pick a fight with us and we don't pick a fight with them.
Is there anything else you'd like to see when we have the discussion? Well, May 6th, aren't
I'm not
Councilmember
gonna
Risser?
be here, but if I were, I would want to know the total cost of road that's coming out of the general fund, so what that $1 million means.
What it means?
Like just how much from the general fund we are.
Right now, it's maybe
Percent?
2.2 million, something
Okay.
like that.
Yep. All right.
In terms of levy, or that's dedicated to the 16-year
So we're
program?
taking out.
About half of it, 40%, yeah.
For this coming year.
For this coming year, but.
As we take on more, we would keep it at the 1 million.
Yep.
And so the percentage would be decreasing every year as we as a city are taking on more of the street
Right.
reconstruction.
Yes. Would be just resetting the bar,
Yeah.
dropping back down, and there'd be these small 0.5% every year for recon for that 16-year cycle.
Again, that's a
We've already
policy
done-
decision that council could.
You could raise the
make a
rates
different
again
discussion.
in 5 years, and we could watch models and revenues and stuff like that. But yeah, if we have this conversation on the 6th, then we wouldn't have member Risser at that point, but we understand that kind of leaning towards that percent-based model.
And you're only adopting the amount of revenue. You guys could choose at any point in time how you want to reconfigure how to use the revenue.
Right.
Okay, anything else you'd like to see on the 6th? We'll probably just bring the same,
I think you've got a pretty complete set of information and data there.
do an R&R and just have a discussion at that
Yep.
point
Yep.
when member Jackson and member Pierce are back. Okay.
Just a matter of coming up with a majority opinion.
Yep. Well, thank you, appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Hey, I'm gonna get open my
Haven't seen
computer
you
in
for a
case.
week or so.
I know, yeah, exactly, I've seen a lot of the people around this
We
table.
wanna see you a lot, that
recently.
means we got some stuff going on there, right?
Yeah. Chad and Scott, get that. I need an answer in the next 10 minutes, no pressure calls this time of year. Just kick it off?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Yep.
Hi, everyone.
You're on break, you're theoretically on break this week, right?
Yeah, it's a little quieter, which is, this is actually good timing, because I don't have to worry that I'm gonna get stuck at the Capitol in an evening that I'm gonna come see you all. I think I've met everyone, but I'm Katie Sun with Messerly Kramer. I'm the contract lobbyist for City of Edina. I think I'll just kind of start out with an overview, where we're at in the legislative session and kind of what's happening, and then what to expect between now and May 19th when they adjourn. As Mayor Hovland mentioned, they're on legislative recess this week. And then when they come back, there's 4 weeks until May 19th, which is the constitutionally required adjournment date. If they miss that date and can't get a budget agreement, they would have to be called back into special session and get an agreement before July 1st in order to prevent a shutdown. This is every other year they have to pass a state budget, and that is this year, so they need to pass budget bills in all the different areas. The last 2 weeks before recess were the week of policy bill deadline and finance bill deadline for everything except for taxes and bonding, which are taxes and bonding are two of the areas we're most focused on. So we haven't seen those bills yet. But what the policy and finance bill deadlines essentially mean is any policy bill has to meet the policy deadline, has to be heard in all the appropriate committees in both bodies, or it dies. And on the finance deadline, same thing. It has to meet all the deadlines. It has to be 2 ways and means by finance deadline, or it dies. There's always other ways to get bills passed. They can go through rules, they can get added by amendments, they can, get added in conference committee if you can make an argument it's somehow germane, which there's a lot of creative ways to do that. So as you all probably know, nothing is ever really dead, but a lot of things fall by the wayside and they kind of focus on what's left. So when they come back from session, committees will essentially be done meeting, except for taxes, bonding, rules, ways and means, and finance. So most committee work will be totally done, and they'll turn towards being on the floor most of the time. The bills that we're really focused on this year for Edina are in the taxes and bonding areas. So in the bonding side, the Senate has a target of a bonding bill of $1.3 billion. Essentially, if the legislature passed a bill that size, that would mean they would probably not have capacity to do a bill next year unless interest rates or other things changed the guidelines. But under the current guidelines and economic forecast, that would be that would use all their capacity for the next 2 years. On the House side, they have a target of $700 million for their bonding bill, which is the capacity that the current forecast says for this 1 year. So they could do another bill next year. $700 million is a relatively small bill. It's at least 250 million less than the bill they were talking about last year. And at some point, it gets hard to pass a bill, the smaller it gets, because it has some state agency stuff, but not as much for local projects, and it's just harder to get legislative support for a smaller bill. So for the bonding bill, you need 2/3 majority, so you need bipartisan support. So those bills sometimes are not released until there is an agreement between Democrats and Republicans, which sometimes happens at the very end of session. Other times, the majority caucus will put out a bill that's sort of the starting point, but then they keep negotiating until they can pass it off the floor. But that is a bill that often pops out at the very end of session. On the tax side, the taxes bill does not have a deadline either, but I anticipate we would see the tax bill next week or the week after, most likely the week after, because the Senate has already posted hearings for next week, and they've not indicated that the bill is coming out. So we'll be watching those deadlines. And I think I'm sure you've read in the paper that the state is facing a deficit. They're actually facing a deficit for what are the out years or the tails. So not this current biennium, but the next biennium. And so the current biennium, there is about a $450 million surplus. And if you don't assume they're going to do inflationary increases, which they have to pass legislation to do. So if you don't include inflation, which kind of go back and forth on whether they should or not, they actually have a $1.6 billion surplus. So there is funding this session, one-time funding. The problem is in the planning years, they're facing either $4 billion or $6 billion shortfall, depending on whether you include inflation or not. And so the reason that they're focused on reducing those out-year deficits, which essentially equates to cutting right now. So even though there's technically a surplus this current session, in the long run, there is not. And so the governor had a goal of trying to cut that deficit in the next biennium by half. So a lot of the cuts that you're reading about in the paper, revenue raisers are really trying to reduce that. There's also uncertainty just about the economy and tariffs and if there could be more federal cuts. And so I think that's making legislators not want to do a lot of spending until they know more about what might happen. Just a reminder that it's been a little bit of a rocky session just from a, members' standpoint. As we started after the election, the Senate had a one-seat DFL majority. Senator Carrie Disick passed away in December, who obviously was a big leader in the Senate. But after that happened, then they went to a tie briefly until that seat was filled. Then they went back to a one-seat DFL majority. And then Justin Eichhorn was arrested and ended up resigning his seat. And so now they're at a 34-32, still down one member, and there'll be a special election on April 29th. And then the House started out as at a tie after the election, but one of the members was found to not live in the district and stepped down. There was a special election. So then the Republicans briefly had a one-seat majority, but not enough members to pass a bill. And so that was very messy on the House side until there was a special election to bring them back up to a tie. So Senate still not at full capacity, but they will be after the April 29th special election. House at full capacity, but in a tie. So having co-chairs, every bill to even get out of committee needs bipartisan support. So that just as a frame of a very unusual session, especially just to have such tight majorities or ties in both bodies. So I'll talk a little bit about the bills we are following. I'm going to talk first about just the Edina specific bills, which is what I spend most of my time on, then talk a little bit about housing. Obviously, you've got the League and Metro Cities and MLC that follow a variety of other bills. So at the end, if there's questions I can't answer about other specific bills, let me know. I can add them to my tracker to make sure I'm following them. So our bonding bill, the Vernon Avenue Bridge Highway 100 project has kind of been our top priority. We've had a bonding tour out here. We've met with kind of all the key chairs and co-chairs and leads. We had a hearing on the House side. The Senate is not doing any hearings on individual bills. And so they have not heard any bills on that side, which is fine because Sandy Pappas knows all about our project and they've been out for a tour, and so we're kind of covered from that perspective. I know our authors, Representative Julie Green and Elise Mann, have both been talking to the bonding chairs and pushing really hard to be included in the bill. like I said, the House bill is currently about half the same size as the Senate bill. So the House in particular is one where the local projects in that bill for the entire state may add up to $70 or $80 million total for the whole state. So it's going to be very competitive, but I think we're as well positioned as we can be, very much thanks to our legislators. And then on the TIF bill that we had last year, but there wasn't a tax bill, but we were included. If there had been a broader tax bill, I think it would have passed. That's the TIF projects at 72nd in France and 70th in France. We had a hearing in the Senate. Senator Rest, who's the tax chair, signed on to our bill because she said if it was in her bill last year, she would sign on this year and support it. And so that's great to have her on the bill. And then on the House side, Representative Gomez, who's one of the co-chairs in the House, along with Greg Davids, presented sort of a mini omnibus bill for provisions from last year that she wanted to make sure passed, and we were included in that. So we sort of were heard as part of a broader bill. So I feel like that provision also well placed. There's no state cost to that one. So hopefully if they sometimes create like a TIF subgroup, but we've not heard concerns about that bill at all. And then on the construction sales tax exemption for materials at Braemar and Fred Rogers, that is the one that has a state cost, so more of an uphill battle for anything that has a cost. Mayor Hovland came over and did a great job testifying. The way they treated a lot of the construction sales tax exemption bills last year was, instead of doing all of them fully, they did a percentage of all of them. And so if the bill had passed last year, I think we would have gotten about half of what our sales tax would be. There's a lot more this year, and there's less money. So I would say that's the one where it's just kind of uncertainty around all those construction sales tax bills and how they'll treat them. That bill has about $1.9 million cost to the state or benefit to the city. So it's significant. And I would also just say it's been a group effort at the Capitol. Mayor Hovland's been over there, Scott's been over there, Chad's been over there, Bill Neuendorf's been over there. They've been taking my calls and last minute, can you send me what's happening with this, all the different funding sources? So really appreciate that and the quick responsiveness, especially the next month. As you all know, things happen quickly and decisions couldn't get made kind of at the last second. So I think we're in a good position for all those three bills that we're working on. On the housing front, and Mayor Hovland is even more involved in this than I am as kind of a go-to person, so please weigh in. There were kind of three major bills that were moving, and I won't go into a lot of detail on all of them, but there's a starter home bill. This is what the authors call them, the Transforming Main Street Act and the More Homes, Right Places bill that did a variety of different things. None of those bills met deadline. They all were heard in the housing committees and then referred either to state gov in the House or state gov in the Senate or gov ops in the House, and then never got hearings in those committees. So from a standpoint of meeting deadline, they are dead. But this is an example of there's definitely still discussions happening, especially with the people who really support these bills and want to see something pass. So I think, would not surprise me if there's attempts to kind of move some of these pieces forward. There's a bill related to PUDs that also did not meet deadline, but potentially with some changes could get a little bit more support. So I've been in close contact with Daniel Lightfoot. He's really the lead for the League of Minnesota Cities on this, and I'd say he's done a really great job working on this, and it's put all the city groups in kind of a tough position, especially because I think cities want more affordable housing. They just don't agree that these bills are either going to achieve that or are going to do it in the right way, and so it's a hard position for the league to be in, but they've done a really good job. So I do think, there could be an attempt to try to move something forward. It would either have to be something that would then go through a rules committee or could be tried to put on as an amendment. I think some of the supporters that are frustrated that it's not moving forward have kind of lashed out in ways that I don't think will be successful, but Senator Port, who's the housing chair, like for example, amended one of her bills to take away affordable housing, the local affordable housing funding from cities and have it all go to counties, that she laid the bill over and it hasn't moved out of her committee because I don't think it would have support. But there's real frustration, and so I think we're just, the league's done a good job of being open-minded and saying, we really want to work with you and find something. So we'll see if that pans out. The other, I'm gonna put my glasses so I can read the other housing-related item that I think is helpful to know about is that there was an amendment on the housing bill in the House that would it would make the Minnesota Housing Finance Authority prioritize projects that do some of the things that these bills do. For example, allowing housing in commercial districts, allowing duplexes and accessory dwelling units in residential zones, and not having a separate approval process requiring that if cities don't require more than one parking stall per residence, and a couple of other sort of list of things don't have aesthetic mandates, it would essentially have Minnesota Housing Finance Authority prioritize those, giving funding to those projects. I don't know if that will fly once it gets to conference and kind of with the broader, interests of, and there are a lot of legislators that I think have roots in local government that have concerns about those types of restrictions, but as of right now, that is in the housing bill. And by doing it that way, that bill didn't have to go to some of the other committees where I think it didn't have support. So the bunch of housing stuff is definitely something keeping track of. Mayor Hovland, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Good explanation, I think a good summary. Yeah.
So maybe.
I think the league probably expects that there'll be an attempt to do something in conference committee or, like you said, rules. And at least in one of the branches, you can bring it up on the floor, can't you? Either the House or the Senate.
Yep.
Try to get something moved in on the floor itself.
Yeah, and I think on the House side, it's more likely that that could pop up. So once the housing bills come to the House floor, probably next week or the week after, we may see some related amendments and see if there's pieces that they can add on. So we'll be watching that.
I think you really framed it well, that we're all thinking about ways to achieve housing affordability and production, but the pathways that have been chosen just don't work, from a city perspective. So,
yep.
I was in a meeting with some mayors in West Metro with Kelly Morrison on Monday, and I think one of the mayors there had said that there were like 10 cities in some particular part of West Hennepin County that was represented by one rep, and every one of them was opposed to the bills, and so they didn't, that person wasn't offering any support to the people that were supporting the housing bills because of the fact that all of their cities were opposed to it. So it's illustrative of the situation we're in, I think. Whether you're in the metro area or in greater Minnesota.
Yeah. So maybe I'll stop there and see if there's questions or other bills.
Talk a little bit about Senator Rest's bill on the sales tax. Where's that at?
That one has gotten, she has a bill that would, both Senator Rest and Representative Gomez have bills that would impact local sales taxes. It would only, the way they're currently written, it would only impact new sales taxes, or for example, if we wanted to change Edina's tax or extend it, then we would kind of be under the new rules. But we wouldn't be under what's currently passed. It wouldn't impact what's currently already passed. But essentially, they do kind of take a couple of different tax. That Aisha Gomez's bill would require the cities surrounding a city that wants to have a local option sales tax to provide approval or support. Not exactly clear like what that means, if it's like a resolution or something. And it would also, it starts out sort of saying cities will be able to impose a sales tax without legislative approval. You have to have voter approval still, but for certain types of projects. And so for certain types of projects, you wouldn't have to come to the legislature. You could go ahead. But the caveat is you have to get support from surrounding communities, and you have to, there's a formula that essentially you share a portion of it with other communities nearby that are surrounding you, who essentially the thought is like if those people are coming into your community and paying the sales tax, then they would get a portion of it back. I think the mechanics of it are still like probably hard to figure out exactly how all the pieces work together. I know the city groups have said they support the idea of allowing more flexibility, but some of the specifics on how exactly that would work, and especially for smaller communities where maybe you need the entire sales tax to build your community center or whatever the case may be. If you're sharing 20% of it with surrounding counties, it might make that project harder to do. That's probably maybe less of a big deal for cities with significant commercial base in the metro. There's been a lot of discussion kind of throughout interim between both Senator Rest and Representative Gomez in particular. I'm not sure this session if they'll get to agreement on anything. I mean, I would say everything, as I kind of walked through what's been happening since session started, you know, it's a hard year to get agreement on stuff, other than kind of what you have to get agreement on. So I think the closer we get to the end of session, the more focus is just on the budget and getting out of there before something happens at the federal level that they have to react to that could be very significant. But I do think so I think the conversation is likely to continue even if they don't do anything this session. I mean, I've been watching to make sure nothing is going to be retroactive, which I don't think it would be, because cities have based their capital plans on the amount of money they were planning to correct and borrowing plans. So I just do not imagine that they would. I've not heard anybody propose that. But it would impact it if you wanted to extend it or use it for something different. Then it would click on. So.
Other questions for Katie? Anything else you think you should be letting our council know about that you're concerned about, or from an observation standpoint?
Not right now. I mean, I think the housing pieces is the one that seems like it could be a surprise at the end, potentially popping up. But it's been a quieter year in a lot of other ways.
Katie, how does the difference between the Senate bonding bill and the House bonding bill get resolved? Does that get resolved in conference, or does it get resolved ahead of that?
It's gone a lot of different ways in different years. Typically, in a normal year, you know, the House and Senate would each pass different bonding bills and then go to conference committee and then resolve it in conference committee or behind the scenes. Some years, especially if they get crunched at the end, it's almost just been a four-way negotiation right away between all four caucuses so that they can move quickly and pass something. So the Senate Republicans are the only caucus that doesn't have any gavels. And so they want to leverage, I mean, as any minority caucus typically does, they want to leverage their bonding bill votes for things in other bills. So then it becomes not only a negotiation about the bonding bill, but somebody needs something in education or somebody needs something in the tax bill, which is the other reason often it gets pushed to the end, because those things kind of get collected and moved at the end. So depends a lot, I would say, especially on the Senate Republican caucus and what they need and whether the other three caucuses can feel like it's stuff they can give them. So it's been rare that they form a conference committee and have a really back and forth.
We had an online conversation with Chair Gomez in the House on our sales tax issue, where, you know, the request to be alleviated from the responsibility to pay back $1.9 million in sales tax to the state for equipment, materials, and supplies. And the response was basically, well, we need the money. You know, I mean, from a policy standpoint, to have one unit of government charging another unit of government sales tax doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. But she said we need the money.
Yeah. And I do think there's a general agreement that the policy doesn't make any sense and I mean, cities are exempted from all other sales taxes, and the intention was to exempt construction materials. Just the way that the law was written, it's actually just not workable for cities to do that, but that was always the intention. And when they've had money, there's been a willingness to do the exemptions. But I think this year, when there isn't money and they're trying to do cuts, it is going to be harder, even though I think from a policy perspective, they agree.
It also doesn't make a lot of sense for cities to have to foot the bill for rebuilding the bridge over the highway. Was there any movement on the increased local bridge replacement program funding?
I think once the bonding bill comes out, we'll have a little bit more information, yeah. I haven't seen any proposals to increase that. Yeah, I mean, the transportation bill, I can look and see if there's anything in the transportation bill related to that. Since the transportation bill is a little more separated from the general fund because so much of the revenue in transportation, is sort of self-sustaining, the gas tax and tab fees and those all increased in 2023. So the transportation committee has additional funding that other committees don't have, but most of that kind of has a process through MnDOT already, and so it's less impacted by the legislature typically. But I'll look and see if there's anything in the transportation bills related to that, because that is one area where there is additional funding.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
yeah, and they're part of the fire drill when I was calling Chad and Scott there was some question of whether our project could be in the transportation bill, which would have been nice because we wouldn't have to worry about whether they pass a bonding because they have to pass the transportation bill. But because it doesn't really use trunk highway funds, I mean, they don't have any general fund money in transportation, they only have trunk highway funding. So they were really just looking at projects that could get funded with trunk highway. So, which is just, state owned.
But not bridges over trunk highway.
Not bridges over
It
trunk.
should be bridges over trunk
I
highway.
thought they were our partner on what's going over a trunk highway.
Doesn't meet the definition for that funding.
Why not? It should. If it falls apart, it'll.
And it's in the Constitution, so we can't do like a notwithstanding. They're constitutionally dedicated, so they have a lot of rules about that funding.
Yep.
They know right off the bat what can and can't be.
Yeah.
But we tried, Julie Green tried, because she's on the transportation committee, so she's been very involved in a lot of these discussions.
Well, they've had an acute interest in bridge funding since the 35W collapse years ago, and they've continued every year.
I think our project is looked upon very favorably, I would say. I mean, I never want to get hopes up when you're going to have such a small bill, but we've just gotten really good feedback about it. I mean, the fact that we have federal funding that hasn't been pulled back, there's multiple partners, it's ready to go. I mean, it's very much like a bread and butter type of project. I mean, helps with bike ped. I mean, so it has a lot of attributes that I think make it a really strong project. So.
I like that multiple partners part of it. So local, county, state, it's a big deal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Other things that you might be interested in hearing about, even if it doesn't affect us directly, or that you've been curious about from a legislative standpoint?
Follow cannabis?
Not very closely,
Okay.
no. One of my partners that does, Patrick Hines,
does.
yeah. I could definitely get you an update on it if you're curious.
Did anything happen with the hearing aid bill? Maybe it never even became a bill. But one of our items was supporting, where is it?
Yeah, it was in.
Hearing aid affordability.
Oh, I don't know, I can look into that, I can see. I've been digging through the omnibus bills since they all came out last week.
Yeah, that was 1.9.
Yeah, I can look into that.
They're not covered under a lot of health insurance plans. So you get kids who age out and it's really hard, they get one, they lose one, they're trying to make it without. And so anyhow.
Yeah, well, I can look into that. I know for items that if it's a requirement that insurance covers something, there's a new process that they implemented 2 years ago called the 62J process, where you have to submit a proposal to Department of Commerce, and then they kind of figure out what the cost is going to be, what the impact on insurance companies, because they were getting so many bills to require insurance companies to cover items that they wanted to sort of streamline it and figure out how to prioritize. So I think this year there were only a couple additional requirements for insurance coverage, but I'll double check on that one. But it's gotten a little bit harder for that reason, or at least extends the process, because you have to go through it the year before. Yeah.
There's been discussion over there about what happens if the federal government cuts off Medicaid.
I mean, I think part of the discussion is at least was about timing and whether if the federal government made decisions in time for the legislature to deal with it before May 19th, could they actually do that? Because I think the thought is it's about $1.7 billion hit to the state of Minnesota if they were going to fill it in, like replace the gap. So versus if they pass a budget and then they adjourn and then it happens, they potentially have some more time to talk offline and figure out. I mean, I think it would be hard to convince Democrats to cut that much out of other things. And, it's always a discussion of, are you going to raise revenue or are you going to do cuts? And I think right now the numbers they're talking about for this current budget, they could do with pretty minimal revenue raisers. I think it'd be hard to, I think from a DFL perspective, very hard for them to swallow the cuts they're doing now, plus another $2 billion in cuts with no additional revenue. And so then obviously it's a very different, more controversial discussion about what revenue raisers do you potentially look at if that happens, or do you not backfill it, and what are the impacts? So I think it's something that it feels like it's kind of a cloud over everything else, and they're not wanting to do things like, we have $3.5 billion in the rainy day fund. It's one-time money, so you can't use that to permanently backfill Medicaid, but there are some tools they have at their disposal but they're not wanting to use now for the current deficit, sort of in anticipation that they might need it later. So it's absolutely like something they're thinking about. And I think the uncertainty is making everyone just not want to spend any additional money this year, kind of on both sides of the aisle.
Okay. All right. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank
Reach
you.
out at any time if you have questions. I'll be in touch because probably a lot will happen next month.
We're comfortable adjourning?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, stand adjourned.